Hi, I'm James Vowles. I'm the Chief Strategist for the team, and I'm here to answer your questions about the Italian Grand Prix. Wow, what an incredible race. So much happening start to finish and drivers fighting incredibly hard for their position. At the beginning of the race, you would have seen Vettel and Lewis coming together at turn 4. Lewis able to get alongside, Vettel turning in and breaking his front wing as a result. He dropped to the back of the pack as he came into the pit lane to change his front wing and tyres. From then onwards, after the safety car restart, Lewis was able to get alongside and ahead of Kimi retaking the position shortly afterwards. The race from then onwards was a strategic battle between Lewis and Kimi. Lewis was able to hang on to the back of Kimi, and when Kimi came in, go very, very long and start offsetting his tyres. Kimi was pushing tremendously hard, damaged his rear tyres, got caught up behind Valtteri, and when Lewis caught back to the train, was able to then bring the fight to Kimi and ultimately do an incredible manoeuvre to take the win. Valtteri had his own race for the podium. He was fighting incredibly hard against Max all race, ultimately trying to overtake into turn 1 and Max just making contact with him, receiving a penalty as a result of it. Valtteri finishing on the podium and Kimi in P2. Hi Louis, thank you for your question which came via Facebook, and it was around whether or not Lewis sustained any damage to the car after Vettel and himself had contact at turn 4, and the answer is yes. In Vettel's case, it required a front wing change and he had damage around the floor. In our case as well, there was damage sustained on the left-hand side of the car, around the floor and side pod area. It was not so extensive that clearly he couldn't fight for the win anymore. It didn't dramatically affect the balance of the car, but it was a loss of performance. We didn't really see the extent of the damage until the end of the race when we could have a look around the car. Hi Osman, thank you very much for your question which came via Twitter, and it was around Sebastian Vettel's pit stop, when he was released towards the fast lane when there was traffic there. The FI are extremely diligent and are very much looking at this matter all of the time. There's a number of cameras around the pit lane that allow them to see what traffic's there and what's going on. In the case of Monza, the pit lane is incredibly wide and sufficient to be able to have a car in the fast lane and what we deem as the middle lane, so effectively between where the pit stops take place and the fast lane, and two cars can run alongside safely. In the case of Monza, that's what happened with Vettel and why no penalty was issued. Hi Dan, thanks for your question which came via Twitter. And it was around Lewis's strategy and how did we come about to deciding to go very, very long with him. Around lap 20 was the first opportunity we had with Lewis to undercut Kimi. Ferrari took that and covered the undercut. It was a correct decision. Had they not come in, we would have gone for the undercut at that point in time and stopped. As soon as that happened, you would have heard the message go out to Lewis of hammer time. Push as hard as you can. Let's see if we can get an overcut, which is the second of the options available to us. It was close, but it wasn't quite on the cards. We weren't able to do it. Kimi was incredibly quick on those fresh soft tyres and was pushing very, very hard for a number of laps. We then opted for the third option, which is available to us, which is to go extremely long. In Monza, it's typically a one-stop race. Typically, the degradation's on the lower side, and the tyre is very much a little bit flexible as to how many laps you can do on them. We push very, very long with the intention of creating a big performance delta between Lewis and Kimi. And normally, you would lose race time. Kimi would be very quick, as on fresher tyres, he would pull back in towards you again, so you'd lose some of the gap, which you'd have to make up end of race. On this occasion, though, Valtteri was also going very long against Verstappen, and what it meant is Kimi was ultimately caught up in traffic. Lewis was able to stop much later on, have fresher tyres and get caught up behind Kimi. And Kimi had done the damage by that point in time. Blisters had started to form, he'd pushed incredibly hard. And from then onwards, it was a battle for Lewis and Kimi as to who could win the race, ultimately with Lewis overtaking fantastically into turn 1 and taking the win. Adam, thank you for your question which came via Twitter, and it was around Valtteri's race. What did we do with him tactically? Did we know that we were always going to go long the way we did? With Valtteri, he was fighting extremely hard to get past Max on the first stint of the race, but wasn't quite able to overtake. The only way we're going to get through him is again an undercut or offsetting the tyres, and we'd chosen fairly early on to look after the tyres and go long on that stint. When Verstappen came in on lap 26, it allowed Valtteri some clean air to make the most of. And Valtteri's pace was good. He was matching Verstappen on times, even though Verstappen was on fresh, soft tyres. We knew that Valtteri could be interacting with Kimi, but the concept was also making sure Valtteri had the best chance possible of finishing on the podium. And from then onwards, since he was matching Max's times, it was to go as long as we could and make sure that we had the freshest tyres possible to be able to overtake at a later stage. That did mean that he interacted with Kimi and had to defend against Kimi, but at no time was he losing any more time relative to Max, and all he was doing was building up a tyre buffer, which ended up working out very well for him. Alex, thank you for your question, which came via Twitter, and it was around why Valtteri struggled to get through Max Verstappen. First into the race, Valtteri and Max were on exactly the same age tyres, super soft, and in a situation where the Red Bull was very quick in a straight line. It was a better car than it was in qualifying. It was much faster in race trim than it had been in qualifying trim. And furthermore, Red Bull had opted for a slightly lower drag setting than perhaps us and Ferrari, and as a result of it, were very competitive in a straight line. Max is difficult to get past at the best of times. And in that circumstance, once we'd seen that we just simply didn't have the straight line speed and the run on him to be able to do it, we'd opted to look after the tyres and just sit behind and wait. Later on in the race, you would have seen Valtteri now on much fresher tyres relative to Max and very competitive. And in that circumstance, Max was now under a huge amount of pressure. He went off at the first chicane and had a joker call as a result of it. He could only do that one more time. The second time that Valtteri got alongside, you would have seen what happened. Max didn't quite leave enough room and made contact with Valtteri. Those are just signs of the fact that with our tyre offset, we were now just a faster car. And had that contact not happened and Valtteri not had a loss of lap time, really Valtteri would have been fighting for P2 in that race. Luke, thank you for your question, which came via Instagram, and it was around our tyre degradation and performance 2017 compared to 2018. The car itself is continuously evolving, and the tyre group are very much a part of that. Everyone is working on small, minute, marginal gains that add up to a car that can win a race. In terms of the tyre team, they've done an incredible job over the last 12 months. And even more between Spa, where we suffered from blistering, and Monza, where really we were the best car on tyres. There was an incredible amount of work that goes in to understand every detail of how we should be using the tyres, and they've done a fantastic job. Justina, thank you for your question, which came via Twitter, and it was around the following distance of cars, why it seemed in Monza our car was able to follow just a little bit closer than it would be normally. To follow the car in front, you really have to be faster than it. The faster you are, the closer you can get to it, ultimately perhaps leading to an overtake. And in Monza, we had a very competitive race car, two drivers using it very effectively, and the balance was really working very, very well. Monza also, as a track layout, lends itself much more to being able to follow the cars in front. You have straight corner sequences where you can close the gap back up again. And a combination of both of those meant that ultimately we were able to stay right there with the Ferrari. Thank you very much for all of your questions. It was a pleasure answering them. And we look forward to answering the next batch of questions after the Singapore Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time.